called rock phosphate. It's a natural phosphate source, or you may find colloidal phosphate clay. This stuff really increases root growth and really increases fruit set in your tomatoes. How much do you use? You put a handful of it in the bottom of the hole. As you can tell, I'm really into measuring when I'm out there. I'm not interested in getting things planted. You know, when it's getting dark and you got 48 tomatoes there in the tray to plant, you move through as quickly as you possibly can. But I consider this very important on tomatoes and a very good thing to do on eggplant and peppers and things like that. Now, one thing about phosphates of any sort, we are in a highly alkaline soil. And in alkaline soils, phosphate tends to turn to rock, which plants cannot take up. And again, this was an experiment that Malcolm did. He used superphosphate or colloidal phosphate clay in the bottom of the hole, and he had a big, big increase in tomato production. He actually did one row with, one row without, and it was very evident where he had used this. So he said, man, this is great stuff. I'm going to put a ton of this per acre, 2 tons per acre, what? And he put it down and he blended it into the soil, and guess what? He got no results whatsoever. Well, what it turned out is that when you're spreading this stuff through the soil, it almost immediately becomes insoluble. It locks up to where the plants can't get to it. When you just put a blob of it at the bottom of the hole and you plant your tomato plant right on top of it, or your eggplant or whatever else, the roots go right straight down through this, and because it's just this gooey mass there in the bottom of the hole, it doesn't get tied up in an insoluble form. So I consider this, if you're not going to do anything else, put this in the bottom of the hole when you plant it. It'll make a big difference in the quality of your tomatoes.
And it's okay to put the Epsom salts?
What's that?
It's okay to combine that with the Epsom salts and everything?
Yeah,
okay.
yeah. You're going to use, you can mix them together if you want. I usually, the difference is I put the Epsom salts in when I'm getting ready to plant. Okay. I was all ready to plant my tomatoes 4 to 6 weeks ago, and I was watering and having everything happen. I don't use this stuff until I'm actually putting them in the ground. Okay. So there's no interaction, no problem there. Yes, sir.
You could use that as an additive then if you use a mucilage technique on the transplant.
What do you mean by mucilage technique?
Something I got from doing bare root roses, where you make a slurry of the compost, a very slimy, thick slurry, and coat the plant with that, and all the part that's going in the ground. With
a plant with a woody root system, I think that might be a good thing. On plants with very soft roots, I don't think it's necessary, and I do recommend when you take these things out of the pot that you do, if they have a lot of roots on them, like so, better not lose what this is. But now that's not real heavily rooted, but still when I plant, I'll take my finger and just kind of rip down the side like that, just so those roots spread out. But no, I don't think on this kind of thing, I don't think making a slurry would accomplish a lot. On fruit trees, blackberry bushes, things that you may be planting bare root, I think that would be a real good idea. Yes, ma'am.
Bob, how far up this, do you have to take the little branches off if you
It's better if you do.
Okay.
And I just plant it as deep as convenient. I'd probably, if I can dig a hole that deep, I'd plant this plant about that deep.
And also, what's the shelf life on your products?
If they stay dry, 10 years, 15 years, something like that. Except for compost tea. When I talk about compost tea, shelf life's 2 hours. But these other things, Next week's seminar is compost tea. Bruce Dooley's going to come help me do the seminar, who's a real authority on it. And so we'll have fun next week, too. Come early one more time. But other questions before we move along here on planting these things? Yes?
Molasses, I know you recommend that for other stuff.
We'll talk about molasses for a lot of things. Molasses is a microbial stimulant that anything bacteria do that does well, molasses will help. I use it as a foliar spray. Don't really do much with it in the soil, but it certainly wouldn't hurt anything.
Over there.
Over there, yes ma'am.
I'm starting a garden where there hasn't been one before. It's just grass where the yard is. Do I take the grass out? Do I just put
What kind of grass?
I have no idea.
If you got Bermuda grass, you've got a problem.
Okay.
Because you can't dig Bermuda grass out. It has underground runners, and it is the devil to get rid of. You will fight it. I fight it. I'll tell you how you get rid of Bermuda grass. If it's St. Augustine grass, it does not have underground runners. You take a grubbing hoe and chop it off at ground level, throw it in your compost pile. If you're creating a raised bed, 3 or 4 inches of dirt on top of St. Augustine will kill it. And it's not a problem. Bermuda grass is a problem.
Do you recommend testing the soil when you're going to a new spot?
if you're going into commercial production, I think it's a real good idea. And, well, you never know. But I didn't know I was going to be in the nursery business when I started growing orchids as a science fair project, and look what happened. If you do decide to have a soil test, do not waste your time with this fly-by-night kind of thing. There are certain chain nurseries who we will not mention, even if their name starts with a C. We'll talk about that. The soil tests, the cheapo soil tests, are worthless. And because while they may tell you what is in the soil, that's not what's important. The only thing that's important is what the plant can get to. I mean, we could give you a really hard dog bone that has all the nutrients you can imagine in there and would tell you if you could gnaw on this bone enough, you know, you get what you need. But it's not going to work out very well. The only thing we really want to know is what the plant can get to. The way the cheapo soil tests are done, the way the A&M people do it, I think they're changing now. They finally, after all these years, realized what a mistake they're making. But they take your soil, they treat it with a strong acid and a strong base, and that dissolves out all the nutrient material that's in there. I mean, you put enough stuff on it, you can dissolve a piece of steel. But, you know, does that tell you how much iron is available to the plant? No. It merely tells you what is in the soil. You can come in if you want. I think there's a spot to sit in here. The way that plants get their nutrients from the soil is the plant root releases carbon dioxide. Carbon dioxide reacts with the water in the soil to form something we call carbonic acid, which is very mild acid, which then dissolves away, solubilizes a little bit of the material that's there, and that's how the plants take up their nutrients. So if you want a good soil test, you send it down to Texas Plant and Soil Labs down in Edinburgh. If you want more information, their website is TPSL, is in Texas Plant and Soil Labs, tpsl.biz, B-I-Z. How much does it cost? I think it's 45 bucks. And you get a very complete soil test. Everybody says, well, you can get it at A&M for $15. Well, sure, but you're not learning anything. And if you ask A&M to run the same whole series of nutrient tests on your soil, they'll charge you $68 to do what they do for $45. So if you feel you need to get a good soil test, you take one test at the surface, you take a second sample 12 inches down, you send it down to K. Chandler and Company at TPSL, and they will give you a good, honest evaluation. Is it necessary? No, I don't think so. If you want the same kind of test that you get some of these other places, I'll give you that result without even seeing your soil. I could be Karnak or whoever Johnny Carson's guy used to be. Your soil is very low in nitrogen, moderately high in phosphorus, extremely high in potassium, and very low in organic material, and the pH is about 8.2. I've seen about 1,000 soil tests from this area, and that's what every single one of them says. I don't even know if they test the soil. I think they just run off copies of this and hand it out. But again, it doesn't matter. I used to think that pH and all was really important. After doing this for a lot of years, I've learned it really has nothing to do with it. It's the organic content of the soil and the microbial life in the soil. And you get those things balanced, you're going to grow tomatoes and everything else really well. Now, I'm spending a lot of time on tomatoes, but what I'm telling you about tomatoes applies to a lot of other plants. So we're going to move on to other secrets in just a second.
Scott Ogden's book on gardening with difficult soils, are you familiar with it?
Very much.
You recommend it?
It's, to use a very bad pun, it's some of the driest reading I have ever tried to do. And Scott, unfortunately, is a whole lot more chemical than I... Well, shoot, we used to be chemical, too. I hope Scott's... I haven't seen Scott in 4 or 5 years, but I hope he's become more organic. I read everything that comes out and take the good and separate the bad. Some of the stuff in his book is good. Some of it I don't agree with.
There was an interesting thing you brought up in there about our clay soil being different what people like from the Northeast are used to.
Sure, yeah.